Hello and welcome back, everyone. I am Winter and welcome to episode 4 of my Bronze Semester series, this time on replay analysis. It's going to be covering what are replays, how can we use them to improve, what's the most efficient way to look at replays, and what should you be looking for when you're looking at those replays. And that's what we're going to go over now. For those of you who don't know how to get to your replays, maybe, it's kind of self-explanatory. You can press replays or F5 on the keyboard and bring up the replay screen. I actually downloaded a replay from an awesome site called ggtracker.com. You should go check it out if you haven't already. It's pretty self-explanatory once you get there, but it's a really good tool to help with replays as well. I downloaded a Gold League replay between Pant Snake and Stargate, just a random replay that was a decent length long, and it looked like a pretty interesting game. It is a ZVZ, but the matchup doesn't actually matter, depending on what we're looking at here. But getting here, you can, of course, if anyone needs to know, you can leave in the comments if you want me to make a video on how to download replays and how to efficiently upload them. But now, without further ado, moving into the game, I'm going to be showing you exactly what we're looking for in the replay. Now, what are replays? Replays are a play-by-play, well, obviously, just a replay of the game. Everything that happened in the game, everybody's vision, all the units, it will replay exactly how the game happened. It's a complete carbon copy of the game, but you can control it from such an objective perspective that it gives you a lot more insight than, say, losing to a cheese or something like that in game. There are just so many more tools that I think are very underutilized, especially by newer players, with the replay option. And we're just going to go through them right here. Now, when we get into the replay screen, what do we see here? Usually it starts on none. But you get this. Let's go over the replay screen for a second. We see here our supply counts. This is pretty important. This is how much supply each player has, whether they're going to get supply blocked anytime soon. You can see both players simultaneously and how much money they have in the bank. Here we see the time. In the replay, you can tell how far in you are, and of course you have the timer over here at the same time, but you can also use this control, use take command. I probably won't go too much over take command in this episode, more just kind of a cursory look at replays and how to really efficiently learn from them instead of really diving in. That might be a later episode. From here you can control the cameras. You can see just one player's camera. This is what I like to use for coaching some of the time, just watching a player's camera to see what they're thinking. Of course, if you're looking over your own replays, you might want to watch maybe your opponent's camera or something like that. You can switch to theirs as well. Or you can just see what vision they have while checking, oh, did he scout that text structure? And now moving on. And of course, there are hotkeys for these as well. The tabs. We have Resources tab, which effectively tells you what's in this top right corner here. The Income tab tells you how many workers you have and how much money you're making per minute, mineral and Vespine gas-wise, spending, how much money you've spent on your army, your tech, and your economy so far. This isn't very important for newer players to understand really either. Units tab kind of gives you a tab of what's on the field. It counts overlords, drones, larvae, zealots, stalkers, siege tanks, what have you. If you need to get a real count of what's on the field, you can also click on one of these. It's much easier if there's only one overlord. You can double click and it'll bring your camera there in case you need it. The Structures tab shows you what buildings are on the field, and now we're getting a little bit, well, one second. The Units Lost tab just gives you a breakdown of how many resources have been lost by either player throughout the game. And now my favorite and one of the most critical, the Production tab. What are you making? When are you making it? Of course, this is synonymous with the resources in the top right. But are you continually producing? Are you producing what you should be? Is your opponent producing something that you could have scouted? Something like that. The Production tab, almost always the go-to tab to be on, whether you're observing a game for casting or you're just looking at it for purposes of improvement. Now, upgrades is just what's on the field so far. This kind of streamlines, like say you don't have to click on the drone and see they have +1 carapace. You can see it right there. Active forces, pretty self-explanatory. APM and EPM are Blizzard's calculation of how many actions and effective actions per minute. If you really want your APM or EPM, go check out ggtracker.com. It has a much more accurate calculation. And of course you can bring up the name panel, which I don't like to do when I'm actually looking at replays for purposes of improvement. Minerals, you can just see how much income people are mining between you two. And another one I like, the Units Killed tab. Actually now, with the new Observer interface, it'll actually show what units got killed. throughout the game, and it gets pretty interesting later on. But that's not that important for purposes here. All right. I've kind of introduced you to the observer interface. I know most of this was probably already known or self-explanatory to those of you who have ever watched StarCraft before. But now we're going to jump right in. Now, I hope you use the timestamps at the beginning of the video because that's why those are there, so you can skip past the introductory part and go right into the meat of it. And what are we going to be looking for here? This is just basic improvement. Let's say you played a game out either sometime in the last week or you just finished your game. There's a big difference between whether you saved a replay as something interesting or you just finished a game and you're saying, oh, when did he make his spawning pool or something like that, or where did he make his spire or some text structure that you're looking for. No, we're looking to see what basic improvement you can make on your play as opposed to your opponent. So for purposes of argument, we're going to go ahead and follow Pantsnake here. We're not really going to pay too much attention to what Stargate is doing, because every StarCraft player makes mistakes. I don't care if you're a GSL champion or you're still playing against the AI, you're going to make mistakes on your end of the playing field, despite it has nothing to do with what they're doing. You're going to miss an overlord, you're going to miss a drone, you're going to have to cancel a larva, you're going to get supply blocked, or your pylon's in a bad spot. There's always something to improve on, and that's what we're looking here. You start from the bottom, and then you can subsequently get to where you want to go. So like I said, the most important tab, production, followed by income and units tab, are pretty helpful to look for. But what are we going to do? To start out, if you're really looking to pour into a replay, first person point of view, follow your camera, normal speed. Just sit back and watch. Of course, I'm going to speed along here, and I'm going to try to point out any mistakes I see. What are we going to be looking for? There's so many things to look for. There's so many mistakes you can make in StarCraft. But we're just looking for minor things you can think, oh, I screwed this up last game, I can fix it this game. And now, before anything else, one thing I want to say is very important, a strategy I've kind of already gone over in my How to Learn episode, and something I'm going to keep reiterating is, in order to facilitate improvement, in order to make sure you think about it, I want you, no matter what happens in the game, no matter what you see in the replay, write down 3 things you did right, 3 things you were happy with, three things you did, whether it's put your first overlord in the right position, or it's control and engagement perfectly, or it's tech switch when you needed to, something like that. It can be minor or it can be huge. It doesn't matter, but just remember 3 things you did right, but at the same time, 3 things you did wrong. I don't care if you think you played the best game of your life. You can always play a better game in the future if you write down those things you did wrong and improve on them next time, because grinding out 20 games in a row and making the same mistakes for 20 of them is not going to help you. But grinding out one game, not even grinding, but playing one game and fixing the mistakes, game 2, you've just saved yourself 18 games of time and gotten all the improvement out of it. But let's go right here, and I'll just point out some things Pantsnake does. I haven't looked at this replay before. I don't know what happens in this game besides the fact it's 26 minutes and 32 seconds long, so I'd imagine no one does anything too terrible in the early game, so we can still look for mistakes here. Like right now, we're looking at his camera, he's starting his drones. He still hasn't made his Overlord rally point or his army rally point. That's not that important. But let's see. Let's see when Pantsnake from the Gold League makes his first mistake here. Alright, I'm just going to move on a little bit till we have just making a spawning pool. Everything looking good so far. This is the point, like, you should have your build down pat. If there's no enemy intrusion, if there's no obstructions, you have your build, you have your build and you execute it, and this is kind of the situation you want to be in whenever you steal a build, whenever you're working on one. You want to have yourself in a situation where what? Alright, now one thing I question, I'm not going to even get into the build here, but I want to point something out. Right here we see Pantsnake. He just took this hatch, he's now able to make his queen, but I would argue that instead of taking this first, he could make an overlord, and then he can make his queen and his hatch at the same time. And if you're going to make a hatch in your base, it's probably questionable that you want to go for speed early on, because you just don't have the resources right now. Like, looking at his drone count, I mean, he's a little bit ahead, but I think he could look at his build and say, is there any way I could make this hatchery, say, at my natural, and be in almost the same position? And that's something he wants to look into further on. Of course, it's not a huge mistake. This is kind of a stylistic decision instead of a mechanical mistake, but that's something you can think about. Like, did not heavy an economy, like right now, we'll just jump to Stargate's vision, but he's making his hatchery as natural. If Pantsnake does this and he says, oh, you made a hatchery there, was there something Pantsnake could have done in order to get in a decent position? But right now, he's kind of sticking with his build. But what are we looking for? We're looking for if he had any vision of attacks, if he had any potential scouting information he didn't get. For example, in ZVZ, you can always put your overlords towards your opponent's natural for at least a time until queens come out. So you can have that vision. Right now, these lings are going to come out, and he's not going to see them. And that's another mistake, not having your overlord in a position to scout where your opponent is attacking. You can say, oh, instead of putting my overlord here, maybe if I want it over here, I can move it to the front first, and then move it around the side so I don't get hit by any early attacks. And then maybe, now this just keeps going backwards and backwards, like we're building on it. Since I can see those early attacks, maybe I can take my first hatchery at the natural instead of in my main. Maybe if I want to take my hatchery at my natural, I don't go for gases early, but instead I go for more queens. But we'll have to see what Pan Snake chooses to do here. But right now we're just thinking, okay, is there anything we could have fixed in the early game? Things that you can do every single game are the most important. And that's what we're looking at, like with the Overlord placements for Zerg, or with your pylon placements for Protoss, anything like that. With how you put your buildings or rally your units as Terran. But it looks like Pan Snake. Right now, we're just seeing, he hasn't gotten supply blocked yet, but he does have, the question is, does he actually want to spend this gas? Now, we see his, if this is timed out for +1, I'd say that's something he did right. Like, if he gets +1 attack right now for any of his units, I'd say that was a well-timed Evo Chamber, and that's something you can write down as, oh, good job, I did that right. But otherwise, like right now, the Evo Chamber's idle. Of course, there's other things going on, but just thinking about how many more minerals that drone could have been mining if it was at the mineral patches instead of being built into an Evo Chamber, that's a mistake now. Just having that Evo Chamber too early, that's a mistake. Not having the Overlord in the front, that's a mistake. Not having multiple Overlords on the map, that's a mistake. Not scouting what your opponent is doing, and now we see Pan Snake going for the +1, but he still has 76 gas in the bank. Making that Evo Chamber. Now let's go back. Let's go back. How would we fix this mistake? We know what the mistake was. This is just like a trivial example, but how would we fix the mistake? Now, at what point did he have 100 gas? Alright, let's look for it right now. When Pan Snake has 100 gas, let's say he doesn't have to switch up any other parts of his build. We're not going to go back any further than that. But when Pan Snake has 100 gas, that's when he wants to have the Evo Chamber finishing for maximum mining. Alright. Right there. 5 minutes and 22 seconds, he has 100 gas. How long does it take to make an Evo Chamber? 40 seconds? 35 seconds. Wow, that's even quicker than I imagined. So 35 seconds before this point, he needs to make an Evo Chamber in order to have that correct amount of gas. So doing the same build every game, if he made the Evo Chamber at 5 minutes, and oh god, I'm about to do math, and 47 seconds, 4 minutes and 47 seconds, he would have it done by the time +1 needs to be started. But instead, we see that Pan Snake makes the Evo Chamber about... We'll have to see here in a second. It's sometime before the time, alright? Wait. Yeah, 4 minutes and 27 seconds. We see 11 seconds here. And now considering how much time, that drone could have been mining, sure, it seems very minor, but that's still something, that's the difference between having 4 extra lings to defend an attack with the extra minerals or something like that, and just not having them, or having the upgrade with the amount of money you need to make the lings. And that's what's important. It's little things like this. It may seem very trivial, it may seem like little mistakes, but little mistakes very much so add up. And I know I'm just kind of... I hate when I kind of go on about things like this, so I'm just going to run through all the other mistakes that are commonly made that can be easily fixed if you just think about, well, you write down every one and you say, this is not a mistake I'm going to make again. Like, you get a supply blocked at 44 supply as Terran every time. You say, oh, 44 supply coming up, make that depot. Make that depot right now. Other things. Having too much money, like you make an upgrade or you don't spend your money gets above 300-400 in the early game. Where could that money have gone? Is there a reason you have too much, or if you don't have enough money to make any buildings that you wanted to make before an attack comes in, or you want to do an attack, where could you find that money? Maybe you can make one building a little bit later so you can make more buildings later on, and that's what you're looking for. Whenever you have less money than you need to produce workers and buildings in the early game, or you have more than 300-400 minerals when you don't plan on expanding before the 10-minute mark. Those are times you should say, why do I have this much money? How do I spend this money at this point in order to tighten up your build a little bit? The mini-map. maybe spend a game or two just speeding forward and looking on the minimap to see if there's anything you missed. A lot of the time, you'll say, ugh, that oracle came out of nowhere, when you realize you saw it at the watchtower. Like, maybe you had a marine at this watchtower and the oracle slipped by it or something like that, and it just came into your mineral and you had nothing because you weren't paying attention to the minimap. That happens. That happens to me still. Not enough workers. If you're not consistently producing workers, just keep your eye. It's a little bit harder for Zerg, but as Protoss and Terran, keeping your eye on that production tab, making sure you know exactly when you stop making workers, if there's a reason behind it. Like maybe you're doing a 2-base attack, but if there's no reason and you're stopping at like 31 workers on 2 bases because you really want to make those extra Marines, do you need to make those Marines right now? Or do you just need to consistently make workers? Now, one thing I used to do is every time I got supply blocked for more than 30 seconds, say, in a game, I would do 5 push-ups. I've been doing that on stream, like the push-up streams. But if I get supply blocked for more than 30 seconds at a time and there's not like extenuating circumstances, like he's killing my base and all my supply depots are dead or something like that, then that's 5 push-ups. I mean, whatever you can do to motivate yourself and really get focused on not getting supply blocked and consistently making workers. Probes and pylons. Very important, of course. And now, prioritizing your actions. You might want to look. Now, I'm gonna speed forward a little bit here. We'll see how Pansnake controls it. But prioritizing your actions is very important. Maybe you think, oh, I controlled the fight really well, but still you fell behind because maybe you had. Let's say, let's watch what Pansnake does right here. Let's watch the monies of both players as this happens, because this isn't that substantial of a fight. They're both at about even workers, so even if this fight evens up, and right now we're looking at 14 lings to 9, this is not a huge advantage for either player, even though Pansnake is continually rallying in. But let's see what Pansnake does during this fight. Microing the lings, his money. He's about to get supply blocked if he makes too many lings, and he's continually microing the lings. He's doing a good job of it, but we see both players, their money, 300, 400, and now Pansnake does a good job of going back, but Stargate, well, actually, wait a second. Pansnake is the green player. He just went home and he started spending his money. He went up to 600 here, and now he's at, despite the fact his attack looked like it did really well, in the units lost tab, he's actually ahead. I'm sorry, I got my colors mixed up there. But yeah, because he didn't go back, because he didn't make any extra workers, because he was focusing on microing his lings instead of defending. Wait a second. What is with my colors? What side note here? Am I in colorblind mode? I don't know. It's confusing though. We'll just go to Pansnake's vision and assume he's green then. But yeah, we see Pansnake 32 out of 47 supply despite executing a cost-efficient Zergling attack because he wasn't really paying attention. How much energy is on his queens? 19 energy? That's 19 seconds of no injects. This queen has yet to inject. And he doesn't have anything at the natural because of that build earlier on. We've already pointed out so many things that he could have done that there's no reason he should have fallen behind at those points. But instead he did. Because either he wasn't prioritizing his actions, he was making simple mistakes like not placing his first overlord in the right place, being inefficient with his buildings, making them at the wrong time, or maybe making buildings in a spot they don't need to be, say this hatchery for example. And then during the fight, just not prioritizing his actions. If you only have Zerglings, let's say, how should that fight have gone in this situation? How would me from my ivory tower right now control that fight? Once you send your Zerglings in and confirm there's no Banelings, what I like to do, just split some forces up, split some forces down here, tax his multitasking, and then go back, bam, inject this hatchery, start producing, spend your money, maybe start your lair right now because there's 188 gas in the bank and there's no other way to spend it besides a lair, so I want to get that going. But just make sure he spends as much time on these lings while you're just reinforcing yourself back at home, getting further and further ahead. If the lings aren't going to end the game, there's no reason to spend too much time on them. And that's another mistake here you could add up to the mistakes category. But I really don't want just focus a lot less on what happens during the final fight. A lot of players are like, well, if I just had a few more Corruptors against the Colossi or something, then that fight would have gone my way. You know what probably would have been better than having 3 or 4 more Corruptors? Possibly denying his third base, keeping him on 2 base, keeping him from tech switching, and then overwhelming him with more units earlier on. I don't know if that was a possibility, but if there was a possibility, then with the replay you can find it. You can find those timings when he's vulnerable, and if you see that situation again, which being StarCraft, you probably will see a very similar situation, if not an exact one in the future. Find that timing and hit it, and that's how you win games, and that's how you improve. It's a trickle-down effect, really, between what happened early on in the game and what happens minutes later, much later on. There could have been situations that could have been completely avoided or would not even be dangerous at all to you if you made a couple extra decisions earlier on. Or, on the flip side, if you hadn't played a certain situation exactly how you played it, then you could find yourself in a terrible spot. And of course, both sides, they're always flipped, because you can always find yourself behind or find yourself ahead. Everyone starts with the same units. Everyone starts with the same hatchery, the same 6 drones, the same 6 SCVs, the same 6 probes. It's how you control them and how you decide to use them to your advantage that puts you ahead or behind against your opponent. So that's very important to note. It's not imbalanced. The game isn't imbalanced enough to matter anywhere below even the top of WCS right now. It's every decision you make, every action you take will affect later on in the game. And that's what I'm trying to really pin home here in the replay analysis episode, is that when you're looking for mistakes, don't look for scapegoats. Don't look for situations where, like, oh, I was distracted by this. Why were you distracted by this? What could you have avoided that with? Or maybe just had your units in a certain position where they didn't even need to move so you wouldn't be distracted. Stuff like that. The first or second replay you try, you might not be able to point out many, but as you look a little bit closer each time and you start to be a little bit more objective about your own games and even more ideally your opponent's games, so that way you can learn from them, it's a lot easier to see, oh, these little things I could have done. One thing I like to do is write down timings like, oh, a barracks should be finished at 2 minutes and 40 seconds. If the barracks is finished past 2 minutes and 45 seconds, even if he has a wall in, then he's going probably gas first. Another option is he's proxying it, but it's most likely going to be a gas first build, or he just delayed his barracks for no discernible reason. And it's timings like that that you can really get a hold of by looking at the replay, by going back saying, when exactly did this tech building go down? And that's what you're really looking for to improve. One last thing, you can't, well, what am I trying to say? If you're looking for an objective way to improve, if you're looking for more people to play with or maybe talk about your replays with, of course there's the take command feature. I haven't had too much experience with it. It's kind of tough to use, especially when you're trying to improve, unless you have the exact opponent you were playing against. But I'd suggest playing around with that. It's pretty fun. And as well, you can join the Winter Space SC2 group, the group, not the chat channel, on North American BattleNet, and find other players who are interested in the same things. Or, of course, check out my live stream and just chat me up. Just ask any questions you want in the chat. I stream pretty much every day, so make sure to check that out. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it was a little bit winding. It wasn't as focused as I would have liked it to be. But I hope I got my points across. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments below. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again on the other side.